The story begins at the State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, where we meet the notorious killer Mark Trex. He's seen muttering to himself, obsessed with the idea that he must defeat his enemy, who he believes is too powerful. Driven by his twisted thoughts, Trex makes a noose out of his bed sheets and hangs himself right outside his cell. The guards rush him to the infirmary, where the asylum doctor takes charge. In an eerie scene, the doctor instructs another inmate to assist in reviving Trex while he plunges a massive needle, reminiscent of one used for embalming, into Trex's arm. While they try to save him, Trex slips into a vivid dream. In this dream, he sees himself as a warrior, locked in a fierce battle against an evil knight who wears a terrifying helmet adorned with antlers. Trex overpowers the knight and prepares to deliver the final blow with a sacrificial knife. But just as he's about to strike, he's shocked to discover that the knight's helmet conceals the face of Mickey McArdle, a cop who was the partner of the officer Trex murdered a decade ago. The realization startles Trex, leaving him uncertain whether this vision is a twisted nightmare or a premonition of things to come. Trex suddenly wakes up from his disturbing dream, full of anger and determination. Without hesitation, he kills both the inmate who was trying to revive him and the doctor who had given him the huge injection. In the chaos, Trex finds a way out through a window and escapes from the asylum. The story then shifts to New York, where we meet Detective Mickey McArdle. At first, McArdle doesn't look like your typical movie cop. He's not a tough, larger-than-life hero like Cobra or Dirty Harry. Instead, he seems more like an ordinary guy, scruffy, a bit tired, and very practical. He's busy explaining to a fellow officer that the man he's trying to arrest will probably walk free soon. The charges are too serious for what the guy actually did, and McArdle knows the system well enough to predict the outcome. His straightforward and realistic approach makes him stand out as a detective who knows the rules and understands how things really work. In 1979, Trex was involved in the death of McArdle's partner, but the situation was more complicated than it seemed. McArdle had aimed to shoot Trex during a tense confrontation but tragically missed and hit his partner instead. Even though his superiors assured him it wasn't his fault, McArdle has never forgiven himself for the accident. The guilt has weighed heavily on him ever since, shaping the way he approaches his job and life. He carries this burden with him every day, feeling responsible for his partner's death, even though it was an unintended mistake. Trex, now on the run, hitches a ride from a man who thinks his car is broken down. Spotting a knife on the man's belt, Trex quickly grabs it and stabs the man in the throat, taking off with his truck. As he drives, Trex picks up a hitchhiker. Almost immediately, Trex starts unsettling the hitchhiker by singing bizarre heavy metal lyrics and rambling about searching for the gates of hell. The hitchhiker becomes increasingly uneasy, but when he notices a dead body in the back of the truck, he panics and tries to escape. Trex doesn't let him get far, though. He runs the hitchhiker down with the truck. To cover his tracks, Trex goes even further by chiseling out one of the hitchhiker's teeth to match his own dental records and then blows up the truck, erasing any evidence of his crimes. On the other side, we have McArdle, a cop who's seen as a failure by his colleagues and seems to have lost the respect of his wife too. She doesn't come out and say it, but you can tell from her tone and body language that she's fed up and probably sees him as weak. Whether she thinks he's lost his edge or something more, it's clear she's disappointed. This dynamic sets up a compelling contrast between the two, a cold-blooded killer who's sharp and dangerous and a broken cop who's struggling with his own demons. It makes for an intense clash between two very different adversaries. Trex returns to New York after a decade away and heads straight to his old room. Even though he's been gone for so long, nothing seems to have changed. His mom, clearly stuck in her own world, yells at him for being late for dinner, as if he's just been out for the day instead of missing for 10 years. When he asks if anyone's been in his room, she vaguely mentions that the cops were there, but she's so disconnected that she can't even remember when it happened, yesterday, today, or years ago. Trex goes through his collection of disturbing items, human bones, knives, swords, all the creepy things you'd expect from a guy like him. It's clear that these things are still a huge part of who he is. Then, he heads to a heavy metal bar, where he tracks down a former member of his favorite band. This guy, however, is no longer the wild rocker he used to be. Now he's just a money-driven businessman who doesn't care about anything else. At the bar, we also meet Tiffany, a striking redhead hired to take photos of the band playing that night. She's just doing her job, unaware of the dangerous undercurrents around her. Trex confronts the former band member in a back office, and when he's told to get lost, Trex snaps. He first chokes the man out, then gruesomely cuts out his eyeballs, and finally, in true horror movie fashion, chops his head off with a medieval-style axe, straight out of a Dungeons & Dragons nightmare. Meanwhile, the discovery of the brutalized body from the night before triggers something in McArdle. He starts thinking about Trex's killing spree from 10 years ago. Even though everyone believes Trex is dead, McArdle has this gut feeling that he's still out there. Determined to bring him to justice, he meets with an old colleague and insists on joining the hunt for Trex, feeling that it's his responsibility to finally put an end to the nightmare that started a decade ago. Despite being explicitly told to stay away from the investigation, McArdle can't let it go. His instincts, honed over years of police work, push him to dig deeper, regardless of the consequences. He decides to follow his hunch and heads to the bar where the brutal murder took place. The scene is still fresh with the chaos and darkness of the night before. At the bar, McArdle crosses paths with Tiffany, the photographer who was there that night, snapping photos of the band. She's still shaken by the gruesome events, but McArdle's determination convinces her to help. He explains that the killer might have been caught in one of her photos, and any clue could be crucial. Together, they sift through the stack of images Tiffany took, the tension growing as they search for any sign of the murderer. McArdle's eyes narrow as he studies each photo with the practiced eye of a seasoned detective. And then, there it is, a shot that sends a chill down his spine. In the background of one of the photos, almost blending into the shadows, is Trex. The sight of Trex, alive and in New York, confirms McArdle's worst fears. The photo shows him lurking near the scene, his presence undeniable. This discovery only fuels McArdle's resolve to track him down, knowing that Trex's return could signal the start of another killing spree. Despite the orders to back off, McArdle knows he can't stop now. He's found his lead, and he's going to see it through, no matter the cost. Earlier, we saw how weird Trex's home life was when he came back to his mother's house. She acted like time had stood still, scolding him for being late as if he had never been gone. But it's not just Trex's mom who is stuck in her own strange world. Tiffany's mom is also a bit odd. When McArdle and Tiffany go back to her place to check out the photos, Tiffany's mom yells from her room, annoyed that they're making too much noise. She demands her medicine and seems completely caught up in her own little world. This shows that both Trex and Tiffany are surrounded by people who are stuck in boring routines and can't move on. McArdle and Tiffany investigate further and find out that the old band members Trex used to like have now ended up in dull, ordinary lives. For example, one former band member is now a boring businessman, while another is a washed-up comedian who makes cheesy jingles for ads. Trex, who thrives on chaos, is disgusted by their mundane lives. McArdle and Trex are still haunted by the past. Trex is still as dangerous and violent as ever, while McArdle, despite being criticized and looked down upon, is determined to seek justice. Tiffany is still young and capable, not yet caught in the trap of living a boring life. The search for Trex's mother's old car leads McArdle and Tiffany to a junkyard. There, Trex attacks them with a crossbow. He manages to overpower McArdle, take his gun, and shoot him with the crossbow. Luckily, McArdle was wearing protective gear, so he doesn't get seriously hurt. Despite this close call, McArdle faces serious problems. His boss, already annoyed with him, suspends him for going off on his own. At home, McArdle's wife, fed up with his obsession and suspicious of Tiffany, decides to leave him. Tiffany then brings McArdle an old rock magazine that could help them. This magazine includes information about Trex's favorite band, giving McArdle a new lead in his quest to find Trex. Meanwhile, Trex, using McArdle's identity, shows up at Tiffany's house pretending to be him. Tiffany's boyfriend, unaware of the danger, lets Trex in. Once inside, Trex does what he does best, he kills the boyfriend. But this time, he uses McArdle's gun, making it look like McArdle is the one responsible for the murder. This clever move not only takes another life but also frames McArdle, painting him as a deranged killer obsessed with Tiffany. Tiffany helps McArdle piece together that Trex's favorite band released just one album, a concept album inspired by Dante's Inferno, mixed with some sword and sorcery themes. She figures out that Trex is targeting people he sees as unworthy of living, following the twisted logic of the album's narrative. As they discuss this, McArdle opens up to Tiffany about his tragic connection to Trex. He recounts how he and his partner, Brendan, first encountered Trex, who had been dubbed the Mirror Man by the media. One night while on patrol, McArdle noticed a strange strobe light coming from a window. His curiosity led them to investigate. Inside, they found a room filled with mirrors and flickering lights, creating a disorienting and confusing scene. Amidst the chaos, McArdle thought he saw Trex and fired his weapon. But instead of hitting Trex, the bullet shattered a mirror and struck Brendan, killing him. The guilt of that moment has haunted McArdle ever since, driving his obsession with capturing Trex and making things right. McArdle gets arrested for the murder of Tiffany's boyfriend, as Trex had set him up perfectly. Tiffany, undeterred and determined to prove McArdle's innocence, quickly hatches a plan. She grabs a toy Uzi, sprays it black to make it look real, and boldly holds up the cops to break McArdle out of custody. After helping him escape, Tiffany tells McArdle about her boyfriend's murder, knowing that they need to act fast to clear his name. They decide to track down Trex themselves, convinced that proving Trex is still alive is the only way to get the police and everyone else to believe them. With the help of an old cop friend, they uncover that the last person on Trex's kill list is a subway conductor who's currently on duty. Realizing time is running out, they race against the clock to reach the conductor before Trex can strike again. Unfortunately, McArdle and Tiffany arrive too late to save the last name on Trex's list. Trex, disillusioned once again, discovers that the final member of his once beloved band is now just an ordinary, unremarkable person. The band's former glory, which Trex idolized, has faded, and the members no longer care about the dark, death metal image they once portrayed. For them, it was all just a gimmick, a way to cash in on their brief moment in the spotlight. Trex, devastated by their indifference, feels betrayed by the very people he revered. Just as Trex is about to kill the last band member, McArdle arrives and distracts him, sparking a high-stakes chase through the subway system. They race through trains and into the streets, with McArdle doing everything he can to catch Trex. When McArdle finally corners him, a brutal fight ensues, leaving McArdle beaten and unable to continue. Tiffany, determined to stop Trex, jumps on a bike and takes off after him. She follows him to a grimy factory where the final showdown begins. Trex captures Tiffany and chains her to a terrifying machine with a deadly sharp press. As he prepares to kill her, McArdle, battered but not beaten, swings in to rescue her. Trex, wielding his sacrificial dagger, is about to finish McArdle off when Tiffany plays a tape of Trex's favorite band. The music distracts Trex just long enough for McArdle to turn the tables, forcing Trex to stab himself with his own dagger. With Trex seemingly defeated, it looks like the nightmare is finally over. But in a final twist, Trex, still alive, re-emerges, this time with a dirt bike and a pipe in hand. The climax of the story culminates in a bizarre jousting match, with McArdle on a pedal bike with a basket, while Trex charges at him. Though McArdle is already wounded, it's Tiffany who saves the day. She quickly rigs a cable into a booby trap, and as Trex charges forward, he's decapitated by the wire. The terror finally ends with Trex's headless body hitting the ground, leaving McArdle and Tiffany standing victorious amidst the chaos. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you can watch more movies like this. Thanks for watching.